Hello everyone. Welcome in, welcome in. I hope you're all doing very, very well at the start of this week. I won't lie, it's been a rough Monday. Busy, and then I think there's possibly a good chance that the reason why it was rough was that I stayed up late last night till probably about 2 or 3, and I had to be up at 7. Somehow I feel like it might be my own fault that I was very tired today, and I needed to take a nap. Take a nap after I got home. I made a small little pile of cozy leaves and used a little 2-a-day magic to make it nice and warm and cozy. And I had a nice sleep. But yeah, that could be it. That could be it. But welcome in Lancelot and Crespian. Thank you guys for joining me today. I am still a little bit tired. I think I'll take a good proper sleep today, or tonight anyway. I don't need to go anywhere, thankfully, tomorrow, so I can at least sleep in for just a little bit longer. That extra half an hour, three quarters of an hour really do matter a lot, I think. But yeah, other than that, I've been pretty good. Busy, but I hope you guys are having an okay Monday. Usually it is the roughest day of the week. Although Tuesday feels like for me like the furthest day. It's weird. It's hard to explain. I know Tuesday's like it's Tuesday. Like it's not close to the weekend. It's not the middle of the weekend. It's just kind of like a day of the week. Monday's like the start of the week. I expect Monday to suck, but then Tuesday is just kind of there. Maybe in that way it almost makes it worse. I don't know. But I am looking forward to singing. I am looking forward to singing on Wednesday. We're doing some quartet stuff. Oh, you're busy too, Lancelot. I imagine. Remember correctly, you're a school teacher, so you guys are probably starting back up, and it's probably hell trying to get everything organized and get like any kids who are excited, all excited about being back in school and seeing their friends again. Or maybe they're sad and they're like, I don't want to go to school. Who knows? But I certainly wouldn't want to have to deal with children for like 6 or 7 hours. Hello, Clever. How you doing? I haven't managed to pop into one of Void's streams in a while. I really need to do. I really need to. I need to pop in and say hi to him. I always... They're depressingly full of energy. Oh no, Lancelot, sounds like you're gonna have your hands full. And thank you guys for the hydrate and the stretch redeem. You could deal with 6 or 7 children for over an hour. Ugh. I mean, that's a fair amount of children. But that's only for over an hour. Poor Lancelot has to deal with them for a full day, a full day. But I'm sure he has all those special skills as a teacher. My back is definitely kind of at the stage of pretty much being all good again. Thankfully, you got 22 at the moment. Good kids, but oh my god. To be fair, you do really enjoy it. 22 is a lot. 22 is a lot of children. I would not want to have to deal with that. I would not want, like a child would get thrown through a window because I just get annoyed. I'd be like, this is too many children. I would pick one at random. It's the second smallest group you've had. The most was 33. Oh my god. The third increase. Oh no, wait, no, a half increase. 50%, not a third. I was thinking 33. That's an additional 11, and then I went a third of 33. But no, it's the other way around. But I went to school, guys. I promise. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to singing lessons this week, and pretty much most week, all weeks. I'm looking forward to that. It's always that day of the week that I'm like, oh, this is my favorite day. But we're doing barbershop quartet. and we're currently looking at the lead. We're just doing like kind of like the ending of a song, but it's so much fun, and I feel like I'm kind of getting it a little bit. But now we're working on tone, so like I have to focus on like how I shape my tongue, and like the specific, trying to get that specific barbershop sound. Well, we know why Ruadh doesn't have Father's Day gifts even after over 2,000 years. Yeah. Eventually they annoyed me so much I just like kicked them out of the sheed mounds or into the woods and were like, go defend yourself. Go defend. You're fine. But yeah, it's tricky because it's definitely in kind of the higher sound of my voice. I'm doing Chord Buster March. If you guys want to look that up, the Bluegrass Student Union, very very cool. What we're thinking of doing is trying to do all four parts, like the lead, tenor, bass, baritone, and recording all four parts and putting them together. And if we do, I might like share it on stream, and you guys can listen to how it sounds, and we might even listen to each individual recording, and you guys can be like, "Wow, that's terrible." And then when at least I'm singing all together, it'll be like slightly harmonic. Be like, "Oh, that's okay. Good job, Ruadh," and everyone will be proud, and maybe give me a little head pat. What else? What else do I want to talk about very quickly before? Oh yes. Okay, so. Live 2D model. Most likely, and I'm gonna try and get out an announcement tweet either to probably not tonight, but like maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. It's probably going to be Saturday the 28th of this month. So 28th of September is probably going to be when I'm going to reveal the live 2D model. I don't have too many things prepared, but I'm going to try and get a little PowerPoint. I'm going to try and do a few little cool things maybe. But I think the majority of it will be, will be just chatting, will be the PowerPoint, will be showing off the model and showing off all the things and gushing over how amazingly my mama and papa did on the stuff. Cat Ruadh, you've redeemed Cat Ruadh. You will pay for your sins, Clever, but for now, I am Cat Ruadh. Meow. I feel like I'm a little too big. Hang on, let me. Wait, no, hang on. I need to shrink myself a little bit. There we go. No, did you? And last a lot redeemed push-ups. Cat Ruadh is expensive. Yeah, you guys don't just get to turn me into a cat for like 15 minutes for cheap. Like I was even tempted to put that at like 8,000, but I was nice. But I have to do push-ups as a cat. I'm gonna go like meow, myon, mew, me. Doesn't even make any sense. The spell takes a lot of concentration. Giving you a good deal, yeah. I really am. But let me do it very quickly. All of my cables are tight. Okay, there we go. Meow 1, meow 2, meow 3, meow 4, meow 5, meow 6, meow 7, meow 8, meow 9, meow 10, meow 11, meow 12, meow 13, meow 14, meow 15, meow 16, meow 17, meow 18, meow 19, meow 20. There you go. you got 20 meows, 20 meow push-ups. 20 meow ups. I don't know. You guys are welcome. Let me get these things back on. There we go. Okay, so so now that I am Cat Ruadh, I suppose I should get into reading because Cat Ruadh especially loves reading. Oh god, I'm gonna have to. With my Live 2D model, I'm gonna have to learn how to add like. Because there's definitely assets I can add to things, and I can have like cat ears and all different types of things, but I'll have to learn how those work. Oh god, that's gonna be difficult. But we are going back into reading about medieval Ireland today. Last stream I felt was... I did find it interesting, but it was very dry. It was there was some interesting stuff on art, but a lot of it was economy, industry, trade, kind of how the major cities developed, where they were developing. And it was interesting, especially at certain points, but I definitely found it a bit drier than usual. But now we're getting into Victoria II Ireland, yeah. I think I tried Victoria 2 once. And I guess I really didn't give it enough time, I think. I just did not give it enough time. I think I just went back to CK2. But this stream we're going to be reading about society. Because even back then, we lived in a society. As we do now, live in a society. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes. A lot of changes in the 12th to 16th century in Ireland. Because, I mean, there was already a lot of changes with the arrival of the Vikings, but at the end of the 12th century, you have the arrival of the Normans. So we're going to see a lot of, and you do see the rise of, well, not necessarily re-emergence. They were always kind of a thing, those warrior bands, but the specific kind of terms used by the English, the Fianna, the wild men of Ireland, outside the pale, as they would say. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting into this chapter. So I think, let's begin. Society in Ireland would be changed irreparably by the English conquests of the late 12th century. Nevertheless, changes were already in train from the late 11th century due to increasing contacts between Ireland, Britain and the continent, and the movement for ecclesiastical reform. In 1171, these external influences combined in the invasion of Henry II of England, which was undertaken with the prior assent of Pope Hadrian. Thereafter, medieval Irish society would be characterised by a division between Gaels and, quote, the English born in Ireland, as the descendants of English settlers who had come to style themselves. While the division between the two groups was rarely clear-cut, it remained politically significant. I will say because I do need to do either a stream or maybe just a video where I read the first kind of opening of this book. I think it's the first 25 or so pages. The author does state that they're writing about the island of Ireland, not necessarily about the Gaels or any one particular people or the Irish. It's the island of Ireland that he is writing about. The perceived need to reinforce boundaries between English and Gaelic identities was continually upheld by the elites who had a vested interest in maintaining segregation. To place the relations of Gaels in the English in context, it is worth considering Ireland's external contacts and identity before the invasion of Henry II. The takeover of England in 1066 by William the Bastard, later known as the Conqueror, seems to have coloured Ireland's relationship with the continent. It has been noted that the number of Irish kings and clerics going on pilgrimage abroad appears to decline significantly after 1064, which may reflect some reluctance by high-status figures to travel throughout the territory under Norman control. I know, the author just throwing that in there, based. contact was soon made between the Norman Church in England and Ireland as successive archbishops of Canterbury sought to claim authority over the Irish Church. Dublin was used as a foothold for these ambitions. Its bishops were consecrated by successive archbishops in Canterbury in 1074 and 1085, 1096 and 1121. King Stephen, 1135 to 54, tried and failed to obstruct Irish efforts to gain papal recognition for an ecclesiastical hierarchy that made Dublin free from English control. Thereafter, the English Church sought papal sanction for military intervention in Ireland, on the basis that the Gaels were in need of externally imposed ecclesiastical and moral reform. Oh yeah, that's why he was known as the bastard. But I mean, the author didn't have to call him that. The author, Claire Downham, could have easily called him just William the Conqueror or William of Normandy or something, but she didn't. Based. Ecclesiastical matters alone cannot explain the growing tensions in relations between the English and Irish in the 12th century. The participation of Muirchertach Ua Briain, King of Munster, who died in 1119, in Irish sea politics conflicted with the interests of Henry I. He used economic sanctions to bring him to heel. Techniques of intimidation were also used by Henry II. In 1154, the Irish overking Muirchertach Mac Lochlainn imposed his authority over Dublin, seizing it from control of Henry's ally, Diarmait Mac Murchada, King of Leinster. And that's a very important name, Diarmait Mac Murchada. In the following years, the King's Council discussed the invasion of Ireland, and the papal bull Laud Abilitar was acquired to support Henry's invasion, to, quote, proclaim the truths of the Christian religion to a rude and ignorant people, quote, unquote, in return for an annual tribute to Rome. Once Muirchertach's threat to Dublin receded, Henry shelved plans to invade until Diarmait Mac Murchada's death. The invasion of Ireland in 1171 was the culmination of a century of changing Anglo-Irish relations, whereby English lay and spiritual leaders sought to impose their will on a people increasingly regarded as rude and ignorant. Negative stereotyping became a common feature of Anglo-Norman writings concerning their Celtic-speaking neighbours from the 1120s. This discourse had colonial connotations, depicting the neighbours of the English as inferior and in need of domination. However, Celtic speakers were not uniquely denigrated in European literature. Othering was not unusual in 12th century texts commenting on minorities and those who belonged to different cultures. It was a tactic used to present a writer's ethnic, political, and linguistic community as superior in relation to another, toward which the writer and his audiences harboured animosity. For example, in the, quote, Pilgrim's Guide to Santiago de Compostela, the Poitevin author describes the people of Navarre as a barbarous nation, debauched, perverse, perfidious, disloyal, and corrupt, libidinous, drunkard, given to all kinds of violence. English stereotypes of the Irish reached advanced and notorious development in the writings of Gerald of Wales at the end of the 12th century. Gerald's family had taken part in the invasion of Ireland, and he had a vested interest in portraying the Gaels as lesser people. While Gerald was favourable towards Irish music and clerical piety, he was overwhelmingly negative in presenting the Irish as sexually deviant, barbaric, faithless, treacherous, and licentious. The words of Gerald would echo through the centuries in later English representations of the Irish. A counterbalance to a few of the judgments made by Gerald of Wales can be seen in the writings of his contemporary, Jocelyn of Furness, in 1180 to 1214, who defended some differences in custom and the faith of the Irish people. Another hagiographer, William of Canterbury, was critical of Henry II's expedition to Ireland and the growth of the anti-Irish prejudice. Nevertheless, there was an overwhelming political incentive for English leaders to portray the Gaels as deviant and inferior. As if the monasteries that saved so much Roman literature needed a Norman to hand them to the Pope's church. In return, sections of Gaelic society held a less than flattering attitude towards the foreigners in their midst. The word Gaul, used by the Irish for the Vikings, carried connotations of impiety, oppression, and savagery in 12th century literature. The label was soon transferred to the English in Ireland. The invasion in 1171 was accompanied by losses of territory, bloodshed, trauma, and displacement. No wonder that some Irish poets wrote negatively of the invaders' arrival and hoped their royal patrons would overwhelm them. The poet Murdoch Albanach Uadalig, Dalig, likened the Brittonic, English, and French invaders to, quote, shoals of coarse fish, ugly shapes with repulsiveness of serpents, invading a pool of noble salmon. The arrival of the English. The conquest of Ireland was largely undertaken by land-hungry magnates rather than through the direct intervention of the English crown. As a result, English rule remained decentralized and incomplete during the later Middle Ages. Henry II had given permission for Diarmait mac Murchada to recruit his subjects in a military bid to regain control of Leinster in 1169. Land hungry? Yeah, they were. I mean, they had, only a couple of decades ago taken over all of England, so you can see why the Normans would be quite incentivized to keep the ball rolling, I suppose. But you can see Diarmait mac Murchada provides the kind of justification for something that they were planning on doing anyway. And many certain apologists, so to speak, or unionists often argue that, the English were actually invited by the Irish kings. Well, no, they weren't. They were invited by one guy who was deposed. One of these, Richard de Clare, better known as Strongbow, brokered a marriage alliance with Diarmait's daughter Aoife. Strongbow's succession to the throne of Leinster in 1171 prompted Henry II to invade Ireland to secure Strongbow's submission, by granting Leinster to him as a fief and seizing direct control over the coastal ports of the province. Henry also received submissions from many Irish kings whom he entertained in Dublin before the winter of 1171. Before leaving Ireland in 1172, Henry granted the rich lands of Meath to Hugh de Lacy to hold by the service of 50 knights. The Treaty of Windsor, which was drawn up with Ruadh O'Crahur, High King of Ireland, in 1175, indicates that Henry was not intending to subdue all Ireland, but envisioned an island divided between a subject king of the Gaels and the English lordship. However, the terms of the treaty were soon dishonoured, and the Irish colony continued to expand until 1235, when Connacht was seized by Richard de Burgh. This brought the majority of Ireland under English rule. I remember someone said, I can't remember who it was, but someone said about the English that when it comes to their negotiations and their contracts, they're wonderfully adept at receiving concrete promises, receiving concrete benefits for vague promises. It was something like that anyway. It's almost their sort of modus operandi in their treaties. The land grants introduced a new elite to large parts of Ireland, but tenants and serfs were needed to farm the land for them. The Treaty of Windsor hints that many people fled in the wake of the invasion. Ruadh O'Crahur was obliged, if asked, to force Gaels from areas of English control to return to them. The Gaelic Irish were treated as an underclass in areas of English control. The majority were assigned servile status, but a small number of free Gaelic tenants are recorded. In lands of lesser agricultural potential, Gaelic lords could retain lands as vassals under English lordship, and might possess a high degree of autonomy. Thus in Leinster, the Gaelic relatives of Diarmait mac Murchada controlled lands in Falmera and Chenslaig. I'm going to pull up where's the image? Is that the one? No, that's the... What's that? I need to move myself over a little bit. There we go. Um... So, oh wait, I have my pointer too. So the areas that he's talking about that that traitor... I'm sorry, I don't like dealing with. He's talking about they managed to also keep control over Felain, and where was the other place that he mentioned? It might not be on this map. It was very awkward to pronounce. By the reign of Edward I, a new class of small free tenants bearing non-Gaelic names can be seen in the records of English-ruled areas. Judging by their surnames, the bulk of these came from England and Wales, although a few Gaelic Irish also bore English names. In addition to English and Welsh colonists, Flemings and continental craftsmen and traders arrived after the invasion, while Otsmen, Hiberno-Scandinavians, remained as a distinct group until the 13th century. Little is known of the numbers who migrated to Ireland and how they were recruited. Nevertheless, what is clearly documented is a perceived distinction between those of Gaelic and non-Gaelic ancestry. Legal distinctions. A remarkable form of judicial dualism came to exist in late medieval Ireland due to the differences between English and Irish legal systems and the imposition of legal apartheid by the English colonial government. England had by 1171 a distinctive common law system, centrally directed and administered by royal judges. This was different from Gaelic society, where crimes were commonly resolved by payment of compensation under arbitration. At the council that met before King John in Dublin in 1210, the magnates of Ireland swore to observe the laws and customs of England. English common law was extended to colonists and Otsmen, but not to the Gaelic Irish in general, except, perhaps, from the reign of Henry III, to those who belonged to the 5 leading royal dynasties of pre-conquest Ireland, that being the Unail of Ulster, the Mael Shocknail of Meath, the Crahur of Connaught, the Brian of Munster, and Meac Marchada of Leinster. The majority of the Gaelic Irish were excluded from common law, which gave them the status of villains in England. I'm assuming it could be just villain, but it's Villein, so it might just be villain. They were unable to access the king's courts, regardless of their status within Gaelic society. Consequently, the Gaelic Irish were at the mercy of the English lords on legal matters. Technically, they might be held incapable of holding land and inheritance or even bequeathing their chattels. They lacked legal redress against injustice. These were obvious sources of grievance. The system of apartheid could only be ameliorated through individuals being granted the right, acquired by payment or through personal connections, to have their cases heard according to English law, or by obtaining burgess status, which could entitle them to English law. Some attempts were made to remedy these inequalities. In 1270s, the Archbishop of Cashel led a bid for the extension of English law to the Irish of Munster in return for the sum of 10,000 marks. You've never seen this PNG before? This was a PNG made by one of my viewers. I can't remember exactly. I think what it was during an ASMR stream they redeemed a trigger word of meow. Then I started joking about being a cat, and then they sent me this a little while later. It does have very smug energy, doesn't it? Meow, I'm a cat, I'm better than you. I mean, that's just what cats are like, though. They just think you're better than them. No, they think they're better than you. And I mean, that's very true. As I do feel it as a cat. I do feel better. But welcome in, my good friend Son. How you doing? Hope you're having a nice start to your week. I assume you didn't get much sleep last night because you were just up all day playing that space engineering game. It appears your superiority has caused some controversy. I'm the one with cat ears. So, like, what do you have? A silly little sheet that you drape over yourself? Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you for the hydrate. You're playing Space Engineers as we speak. Ooh, fun, fun. It does look like a fun game. How when you got up into space, was it awkward to pilot around? Did like when you first went spacewalking, did you kind of tumble around and were like, oh god, I'm going to drift away from my from your you haven't even reached space yet? Then, son, you're just an engineer. You're not a space. You're not even a space engineer. You're just an engineer. Oh no. Oh no. You made an atmospheric ship though? Nice, nice, very cool. I remember playing a lot of Kerbal Space Program when I was a little bit younger. It's a lot of fun. Although I never played KSP2 because I haven't heard good things about it. Apparently there was some like data stealing stuff or some kind of something anyway that a lot of people were not happy about. And then there was also like there were just issues with it, and it was missing a lot of stuff. And I never really made it to any of the big planets. I made it to the Moon, to Mundus, but I never went on an interplanetary journey. That was beyond my comprehension. But welcome in, son. We're reading about society in Ireland in the 12th to 15th century, or 16th century, really. There's a lot of society. I know we live in a society, but there's a lot of it's mainly right now talking about the kind of English invading Leinster, extending their control over Connacht and much of Ireland. They end up kind of falling away in the coming centuries, kind of due to various issues. Their grip weakens. Isn't that when all the monks came over? What? What are you talking about? Which monks? You mean? I mean that was when the late 1100s was when all the Strongbow and all of the other guys that wrote down the Irish pagan stories. No, that was in like this. I think like there is Irish monk stories that come around in like the 600s, 700s, 800s. Now, the ones from like 600 to 700 AD are quite scant and they don't have too much. But like, I mean, there is entire stories and a lot of stuff, a lot of annals and things of history. Maybe there's a particular one. Maybe there's like a particularly famous one that I'm just not thinking of. Or maybe I have my own history mixed up. I'll have to double check that. But I'm pretty sure I've read multiple books on the subject, and they always state that that they have written documents going well back before the 1100s. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. It's currently talking about how most of the Gaelic Irish effectively did not have access to common law in England. Man reading a 7-part video series on medieval Irish history, responding to a guy who knows nothing about. Maybe I could be mistaken. possibly. Who knows? You never know what little things you pick up just like randomly looking around. This system of apartheid could only be ameliorated through individuals being granted the right acquired by payment or through personal connections to have their cases heard according to English law, or by obtaining burgess status, which could entitle them to English law. Some attempts were made to remedy these inequalities. In the 1270s, the Archbishop of Cashel led a bid for the extension of English law to the Irish of Munster, in return for the extension of English law to the Irish in return for the sum of 10,000 marks. However, a lasting agreement was not put in place. In the 1290s, Edward I declared in his Great Council at London that English law should be granted to all who seek it. In 1331, one law was ordained for the Irish and English of free status. Throughout the Middle Ages, Brehon law continued to flourish in lands under Gaelic lordship. Its penetration into areas of English control was seen to challenge and undermine the power of the royal courts. The problems of lawlessness that plagued the English colony from the end of the 13th century led to the expedient adoption of some principles of Gaelic law. These included kin co-focus, the principle that leaders of kin groups were responsible for the misdeeds of their members. Legal divisions between the Gaels and the English of Ireland reinforced other cultural differences witnessed in language, dress, and custom. However, a degree of pragmatic acculturation between the two groups did occur. Many first-generation settlers helped to establish themselves in Irish societies by marrying the daughters of Gaelic elite. More generally, contact across cultural boundaries was a feature of daily life in Ireland. From the mid-13th century, a more self-confident assertion of Gaelic culture and traditions can be observed. As the strength of English lordship in Ireland started to wane, there were fears that the English of Ireland would culturally and politically unite with their Gaelic neighbours. A raft of parliamentary legislation was passed to try to prohibit degeneracy, from Latin degenerate, degenerato, or degenerare, to depart from one's genus by adopting alien traits, and the absenteeism of English landlords from Ireland in 1297, 1310, and 1320. English fears of degeneracy in Ireland might usefully be compared to those of the French in Outremer, and reflect wider European insecurities about identity and political allegiances. Degenerate Latins, you can't believe this. I think it's more, that was just saying that from Latin, degenerare. It was confusing because there wasn't a gap between, there wasn't a space between to depart and degenerare, so I thought it was like degenerare too. I got very confused. Outremer, I believe that was the name of you can't wait a minute. You can't believe degenerate Latins. Son, don't. You might not want to look at certain emperors. Then there's a couple of silly guys in there. Outremer, I believe, was the name of the kind of culture that came to be developed in like crusader areas of the Middle East during that period. I don't know how, because it was very French, I think. But I guess there was probably fears of them taking on too many of the Arabian cultures. This is worse than the time the Byzantine Roman emperor declared Latin to be a vulgar language, and then he called himself Basileus. The Greek word for forgive my French, king. He didn't even call himself Kaiser. Hadrian might agree. What was I thinking? I did have that happen in a CK3 game one time. I remember I was playing as Ireland, and I was pretty strong at this point. I had taken over most of the British Isle, and there was a crusade for Jerusalem, and I managed to get my family on the throne by like doing the most to support it. Really, I just cheesed killing most of my soldiers because that gets you tons of war support, which doesn't make any sense. But I remember like being really happy because then I had like multiple families on the thrones of various regions, and I couldn't really interact with them. They were too far away, so I kind of was just like playing, just biding my time, building up my power base, extending, doing more stuff. And I looked over. No, sorry, it wasn't CK3. It was CK2. And then I looked over after like, I think like 50 years or 60 years. And amazingly, I was amazed that Jerusalem had still survived. My daughter had become an insane leader, and she had married matrinally as well. So she kept like my family name. So I was really impressed. They because usually the kingdoms of Jerusalem get instantly crushed because they just get insta-jihaded in CK2. And that gives them the entire kingdom back. But they survived, they beat back, they were actually taking a ton of land. and they were expanding like crazy. So I was like, amazing, amazing. I looked away. I looked back another, like, I think it was like 30 or 40 years later, and I realized that the name looked really weird, and for some reason they were calling themselves a was it a caliph? I don't think it was a caliph, but it was like the Muslim cultural name for a king. So I clicked on it, and I realized my family still controlled that throne. They still controlled Jerusalem as a crusader family, but they were now Muslim. I kind of just looked and went like, what? It was a very confusing moment, but now I can see why you might be concerned about those things. It was quite a blow because that was like a great victory for my family. Then I felt so embarrassed in the continent. In unsettled conditions, English magnates might, for their own security, reach a modus vivendi with Gaelic communities. The 14th century saw an increase in licenses to parley, that is, negotiations between English and Gaelic leaders to secure peace. Undoubtedly, many negotiations took place without official consent. The severe impact of the Black Death in the English community and the increasing Gaelicization of the English in Ireland may have heightened fears that the colony was heading towards oblivion. The Statutes of Kilkenny were drawn up in 1366 in a bid to reassert English royal control and limit the growing vigour of Gaelic culture. The statutes were remarkable for the power the government attempted to wield over society. Not merely were English laws and peace between English subjects to be maintained, but the English were prohibited from sex, alliance, or trade with the native Irish. The Irish language was banned in areas of English control. Gaels were also prohibited from ecclesiastical professions or working as minstrels in English-held areas. Even name-calling between the English-born in Ireland and the English-born in England was banned. The statutes indicate that their identity of English in Ireland was becoming more unfamiliar to other English subjects. However, English government lacked the power to enforce the statutes and many were ignored. Yet the mistaken assumption that cultural difference could be equated with political disloyalty would continually resurface. It sounds like that's sort of I'd never heard of these statutes of Kilkenny, but that's sort of like a proto. It seems to be more focused on the English themselves, but it's sort of like a proto penal law situation that they eventually, enforce on the actual Gaels themselves. Acculturation. According to the statutes of Kilkenny, many English of the said land, quote, live and govern themselves according to the manners, fashion, and language of the Irish enemies, and have made diverse marriages and alliances between themselves and the Irish enemies foresaid. How the English in Ireland saw themselves has been a matter of heated debate. One question has been whether the English in Ireland had become by the 14th century a middle nation, neither fully English nor fully Irish, or whether the distinctiveness was more of a regional trait, akin to the Northerners living on the march near Scotland. There are numerous examples of English people in Ireland who embraced aspects of Gaelic identity. One oft-cited individual is Gerald Fitzgerald, 3rd Earl of Desmond, who died in 1398. He was born to one of the most distinguished English families in Ireland, and served as justiciar from 1367 to 1369. Gerald was also a patron and author of Gaelic poetry. 30 short Irish poems attributed to him survive. Although somewhat lacking in technical skill, Gerald's poems reveal his knowledge of Irish legends and social ties with the Gaelic world. Gerald sent one of his sons, James, to be fostered with the Gaelic magnate Cahir Uabrian of Thomond in 1388. However, the English born in Ireland were a diverse group, and evidence can be found to support opposing views of Hiberno English identity. The English of Ireland frequently protested their Englishness and loyalty to the Crown in official documents. Their links with England were continually rejuvenated by marriage, military service, rewards, and favour. However, it should be noted that expressions of identity are situational and more complex than individual pronouncements may suggest. Arnold Lepore, Seneschal of Kilkenny, Le Pour. That's a very English name. I'm sure you'll find a lot of Le Pours in England these days. Provides one example. His loyalty to the crown was demonstrated in 1316 in warfare against the Bruce invasion. In 1324, Le Pour spoke out against the English-born Bishop of Ossory, Richard Ledrede, who was accusing his townspeople of heresy. Le Pour called Ledrede a foreigner and stated that the people of Ireland, encompassing both Gaelic and English people, were never known to be heretics. In the same speech, Le Pour refers to Magna Carta, positioning himself as an English subject in Ireland. Le Pour displays a multi-layered identity. He is Irish in conflict with his English-born rival, Anglo-Irish in his personal connections, and English in his loyalty to the crown. In this respect, the English colony in Ireland can be regarded not as a land of fixed identities and frontiers, but as a contact zone between cultures. Identities may be such situational and multifaceted. Le Pour's cheeseburger too expensive. I think you mean a royale with cheese. A royale with cheese. Oh, I need to watch Pulp Fiction again. That's such a good movie. The possession of a Gaelic identity in Gaelic society differed from English identity in that it was based on agnatic descent, rather than status or law. It was theoretically not possible for those of English paternal descent to adopt Gaelic identity unless they faked their genealogy. Gaelic writers did at times distinguish between the English born in Ireland, known as Gaul, or Gaul, and those who came to England, whom they called Saxon, demonstrating a perception of difference between the two groups. While Gaelicization was a feature of English society in Ireland, Anglicization was also observed. Gaels within areas of English lordship occasionally surmounted the ethnic obstacles to their advancement. For example, Robert de Bray, a mayor of Dublin in 1290s, possessed an English name but had to petition England first to gain English legal status. Throughout the areas of English lordship, it is possible to find Gaels who assumed an English persona. Partial acculturation was also common. Gaelic dynasties intermarried with the English and adopted English customs without surrendering their adherence to local society. Individuals' principal allegiances were often familial and regional rather than ethnic, so that the foreign cultural traits could be adopted without compromising self-identity. The whole of Ireland might be deemed a contact zone where cultural exchange went in both directions. No corner of Ireland was sealed from English influence, even in the heart of the English lordship. And even in the heart of English lordship, there was a significant Gaelic population, often regulated to lower social status. Generally speaking, one might identify an Anglo-centric zone focused on the Midlands and Southeast, where the trend might be to draw Gaels who dwelt there into a more Anglicized existence. In the Hiberno-centric zones that made up other parts of the island, the trend would be towards Gaelicization of English settlers. These zones were, however, unstable and influenced by shifts in political power. The unequal social distribution of English settlers in Ireland would also be a factor in the process of assimilation. Examples abound of Gaelic and English lords selectively adopting elements of each other's culture within political border zones. These might be dubbed as top-down processes, or peer emulation prompted by physical agency. I just realized I'm still Cat Ruadh, and it's been way past 15 minutes. So, I'm back to me. I'm back to my normal self. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Wait, I have to find the button. There we go. There we go. Now I'm back to normal. No more cat ears. These might be dubbed as a top-down processes or peer emulation prompted by physical adjacency. Throughout the English lordship, a substantial Gaelic peasantry remained, but there was no significant English underclass in Gaelic-held areas. Thus, in English-held areas, cultural hybridization also occurred as a bottom-up process. The cultural practices of a Gaelic underclass became woven into colonial society through day-to-day contact. Gaelic influence filtered through all levels of English society in Ireland. This generated anxiety within English colonial society and a conscious desire to enforce cultural separation that was reflected in legislation from the end of the 13th century. As Anglicization was more a matter of selective adaptation in Gaelic areas, and may have been deemed less of a threat. From the late 13th century until the late 15th century, many lands that had fallen under English control were taken by Gaelic rulers. The label Gaelic revival is often used to describe this process, but this term obscures the subtleties of highly localized and variable shifts in political power. These changes helped revitalize expressions of Gaelic culture in literature and political ritual during the 14th and 15th centuries. This overlap of areas of English and Gaelic control also encouraged greater assimilation between English and Irish cultures. Studies of later medieval Ireland have tended to analyze divisions and boundaries between Gaelic and English politics and culture. However, the fluidity of relations in a contact zone undermines attempts to gather much more than individual snapshots of identity and acculturation over time. Nor were there only two cultures of contact in Ireland. The coasts of Ulster were a gateway to Scottish influences, and farther south, regular contacts with continental Europe and Wales added to the cultural mix in medieval Ireland. Plague and famine. Plague and famine had a significant impact on society in the latter Middle Ages. In the 12th century, harvests had generally been profitable and the population grew. However, even in those times, famine and pestilence visited Ireland each generation. A series of poor harvests led to famines and epidemics in the late 1220s. Particularly in Connacht, where warfare aggravated the misery. Population growth continued until the 1270s, when the deteriorating climate and over-exploitation of resources led to increased incidences of famine. In 1295, the great scarcity of food was exacerbated in English areas by purveyance for the wars in Scotland. In the margins of the Liber Niger of Christ Church, Dublin, it was noted that so great was the famine in Ireland that the poor were eating those hanged from the gallows. Worse time followed. The great Northern European famine of 1315 and 18 followed the destruction of harvests by war, or by wet, stormy weather, and a livestock pestilence of cattle and sheep. The problem in Eastern Ireland was exacerbated by military campaigns of the Scottish magnate Edward Bruce. The devastations of the early 14th century weakened the population's resistance to later outbreaks of disease in 1327 and 1328. The populations that had survived these crises in their youth had compromised immunity, and so were vulnerable to the Black Death of the mid-14th century. The Black Death was the greatest disaster to befall medieval Europe. Across the continent, the estimated mortality rates from the mid-14th century plague vary from 25 to 65% of the population, with high levels of regional differentiation. Episodic recurrence led to further loss of life in the late 14th and 15th centuries. The pathogen Yersinia pestis was identified at the end of the 19th century as the cause, although some scholars have suggested that more than one disease was responsible. Recent DNA studies have strengthened the case that Yersinia pestis is both pneumonic and bubonic form. In both pneumonic and bubonic form, led to widespread mortality. Oh yeah, and that's not even talking, like there was absolutely towns that were just wiped out completely. The plague arrived in Ireland in 1348. One of the most vivid contemporary accounts was penned by Friar John Clyn of Kilkenny. It illustrates the grievous impact of plague and describes both forms of infection. One causing buboes, swollen lymph nodes, and the other characterized by bloody discharge from the lungs. Quote, that disease entirely stripped villas, cities, castles, and towns of inhabitants of men, so that scarcely anyone would be able to live in them. The plague was so contagious that those touching the dead, or even the sick, were immediately infected and died, and the one confessing and the confessor were together led to the grave. For many died from carbuncles, and from ulcers and pustules that could be seen on shins and under the armpits. Some died as if in a frenzy, from pain of the head, others from spitting blood. End quote. The pneumonic form of the plague is more aggressive, and it flourished in the cold and wet weather conditions of the mid-14th century. Contemporary sources comment on the disproportionate impact of the Black Death on the English population in Ireland. They include the chronicler Geoffrey Le Baker, who wrote the plague, quote, killed the English inhabitants that there in great numbers, but the native Irish were scarcely touched. While this is probably an exaggeration, the brevity of records of plague in Ireland Irish annals provides some support for this view. The effects of the plague varied from region to region. Records from English manors suggest that the disease hit heaviest in Leinster and was less virulent in Ulster. Population density and trade, often regarded as key factors in determining the impact of Black Death, could explain these disparities. I think clearly it's God smiting the English for what they're doing. Clearly. Nevertheless, recent studies have shown that marginal regions, including Iceland and the Scottish Highlands, suffered high mortality rates, while some central areas of Europe, including Flanders, escaped relatively lightly. A host of factors might affect the virulence and frequency of pathogens as well as population resistance, including levels of nutrition and adaptability in the face of crises. The Black Death exacerbated the problems of the English colony that had already suffered from substance crises and warfare. Four further episodes of plague were witnessed in the late 14th century, with 5 further occurrences in the 15th, the most severe of which was a major outbreak in 1446 to 48. In 1404 it was reported that, quote, many fevers raged throughout Ireland. The population crash may have temporarily abated the risk of famine, although famines continued to be recorded periodically in the later Middle Ages. Excuse me. There seems to be some correlation between food scarcity and epidemics. While some demographic recovery may be posited for the 15th century, recurring wars, famines, and outbreaks of disease prevented any rapid return to pre-plague population levels. Ranks and roles in secular society. A number of changes in the social hierarchy can be identified in Ireland after the 1100 AD. Slavery was widespread in Ireland during the early Middle Ages, but it had long ceased by 1500. The vitality of the slave trade in 1100 is reflected in Lower Neckart, which lists slaves among the high-status gifts given as stipends by Irish overkings to their underkings. Nevertheless, slavery was in decline elsewhere in Europe. Population growth and the... Oh, I forgot to turn off the ads. Okay, hang on. Let's... I'm going to take a... We pretty much just started a new topic of that chapter, so it's fine. I can take 3 minutes to chill out and just chat to you guys. You might not even get the full 3 minutes of ads, but I've now turned it off, so hopefully it'll be okay. I hope you guys are enjoying the reading. I definitely am finding this chapter a lot more interesting than the prior chapter. And I think obviously, learning about trade and economy and commerce and all that type of stuff is important. It is an important aspect in history. But it's like that meme where hang on, let me try and find it. What is it? Historian versus modern historian versus ancient historian. There's a particular one I'm thinking of. This one. I need to save image, go to download so it's nice and easy to find. And where is it? Makes me think of this. Modern historian, I spent a month reading tax documents from 1723 that suggests a 3% fluctuation in banana imports which could have contributed to the Umlian Empire's inflation and economic crisis. But let's not simplify a complex event. There are other factors at play, such as ancient historian. My cousin spoke to a guy who had a dream about this event. Let me tell you how it happened. Livy would never lie to me. No, he wouldn't. No, ancient historians are correct. Herodotus is 100% correct. He literally never told a lie. He is repeatedly vindicated. Repeatedly. He is absolutely 100%. All those ancient, all those modern historians that get like, oh, Herodotus was wrong. You're like, shut up, you nerd. Shut up, you nerd. We should start pushing historians into lockers again. But I wanna. Next time I might look up how accurate was Herodotus. I wanna see like, because I think there was a lot of things that he spoke about that obviously he either exaggerated, or like he would explain something, but it just wouldn't make sense. But then you would be like, oh wait a minute, he's talking about this thing. And obviously he only had these stories from like travelers and stuff. Is vindicated on a tidbit of history. You move closer and closer to reading exclusively ancient authors. Based. Okay, we're back on stream. Let's go. Nevertheless, slavery was in decline elsewhere in Europe. Population growth and the centralization of authority forced lower classes of freemen into worse conditions of landholding, and slavery was becoming economically unnecessary. At the same time, the slave trade was targeted by religious reformers as synonymous with sexual sin and barbarism. In 1102, the Council of London prohibited the slave trade as practiced by the pre-Norman English as nefarious business. Similarly, the Ecclesiastical Council of Armagh in 1171 ordered that English slaves in Ireland should be freed. The English occupation of coastal ports brought a large-scale slave trading to an end. And remember, the coastal ports were mainly held by the Scandinavian, or by the Hiberno-Scandinavians. And considering their connections probably with the other Scandinavian groups, they were probably more than happy to keep those things rolling. But so were the High Kings and the provincial overkings of Ireland, because those port towns generated a lot of money. The conquest may have ended slavery, but it supported in a system that saw people of low rank practically enslaved as serfs. Unfree tenants. In the early 12th century, a beatoch, literally one who gives food, was a free commoner who owed services to a lord. In Ulster and Connacht, they maintained their pre-invasion status as minor landowners throughout the Middle Ages. However, in areas that fell to English rule, most of the conquered Irish were gathered into one class who were bound to the land. Beatoch, or Betug, as their name was anglicized, became unfree, customary tenants. On the manor of Cloncurry, County Kildare in 1311, 63 Betigs shared 341.5 acres of land, just under 5.5 acres each on average. If only I knew just how big an acre really was. As the equivalent of English villeins, Betigs could be sold or given away with their holdings. The typical unfree tenant might be obliged annually to plough 2 acres, to reap 1 or 2 days, perhaps to cart hay, corn or fuel, and sometimes to dig turf and pay rents and burdensome customary payments, in cash or kind. From the end of the 14th century, labour shortages led Betigs to occupy larger holdings and work on better terms, and the label gradually fell out of use in English areas. In Gaelic society, individuals of semi-free status continued to exist throughout the Middle Ages. There seem to be many variations on their level of legal dependency and status. It has been suggested that much agricultural labour was undertaken by sharecroppers, dependent on their lords for legal status and a supply of livestock. A perennial workforce shortage led Irish lords to claim that even their higher status subjects owed labour services, among other impositions for their lands. This has created a difficulty for historians trying to establish a clear division between those of free and unfree status. In reality, these distinctions became blurred in both English and Gaelic areas, as tenants often held land by more than one form of tenure. Free land and farmers. In both Gaelic and English society, free tenants and farmers varied greatly in status and wealth, and could include lords with subjects or tenants of their own. During the 12th century, the position of landowning commoners in Gaelic society came under duress. Lords sought to extend their rights, seeking tribute and labour services. The townland persisted as the basic estate unit of freemen, held in common by kin groups or clans, with varying degrees of complexity in their organisation and assessment. Partable inheritance was generally practiced, and lands were periodically redistributed within a kin group, including to legitimate and illegitimate heirs. However, divisions of the patrimony could also be problematic or challenged. Paritable inheritance might give rise to family discord or could lead to the creation of unviable holdings, pushing individuals into a landless state. Lands might also be acquired through pledge, purpose, or force, as well as inheritance, causing dynasties and clans to rise and fall over time. Land and cattle could also be acquired as fiefs by free tenants, in a temporary alliance with a patron in return for products and services of escort and hospitality, rather than manual labour. In areas of English lordship, free tenants tended to be of English or Welsh origin, although more Gaelic Irish were admitted to their ranks in the 14th and 15th centuries. Free tenants might hold land for rent, customary dues, services including suit to the Irish lord's court. At the bottom of the scale were cottagers, who held a dwelling in a small piece of land in return for rent and labour services. Cottagers often undertook other employment, including paid labour, to make ends meet. Gavellers had better terms, owing fewer or no labour services. From the 14th century, English lords tended to lease lands to farmers on set terms for payment because of the shortage of tenants. Burgesses and guild members. Many boroughs were founded in the wake of English colonisation to encourage settlement, nucleation, and economic growth. British immigrants were also attracted by offers of burgage tenure. Burgesses paid an annual rent, generally without labour obligations, had access to common law, and were free from seigneurial rights over wardship and marriage. While many rural and minor boroughs failed in the crises of the 14th century, larger towns and cities played an important part in Irish society. Cities enjoyed a degree of autonomy, and their citizens received trading privileges, and the right to vote in parliamentary and municipal elections. Their social elites were bound through fraternities or guilds. The guild system of Dublin, which existed for merchants, traders, or craftsmen, was formally licensed by Prince John in 1192, but probably flourished before the English invasion. Membership did not require residency, but could be obtained through apprenticeship, birth, or invitation, and was confirmed by oaths and payments. Within the major Irish towns, guilds organised charitable, religious, and social activities, including plays and pageants, which made them a central part of urban life. While Gaels were largely excluded from the benefits of burgess status or guild membership, a significant number had gained entry by 1500 AD. On the fringes of urban life were a large number of individuals without burgess or guild status who were minor craftsmen, hawkers, carters, servants, and labourers. The wealth of towns also attracted individuals with no formal role in society, including beggars, whose numbers swelled during times of famine, and prostitutes, who tended to be regarded with either contempt or pity in the written sources. Thank you, Crespian, for the hydrate. That's really cold. Ooh, that's refreshing. Craftspeople and traders. Craftspeople and merchants were mainstays of the urban economy, but were also a feature of rural areas, sometimes supplementing their income through agriculture. Hello. Welcome in, disabled_gamer_. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the soft reading. Some craft workers, including comb makers and brewsters, were of relatively low status, producing items for everyday consumption. Other crafts, including silversmithing, were endowed with wealth and prestige. Crafts workers often sold their own produce, but traders served as an important economic role and ranged in status from itinerant peddlers to international merchants. The incomes of craftsmen and traders were vulnerable to economic fluctuations. These uncertainties could be mitigated by entering a long-term relationship with a patron. For example, in 1479, Matthew Uamale Ruanig was identified as a master and goldsmith to the Meac Udair of Fermanagh. Economic security might also be sought through social and familial bonds. You do, but how do you pronounce my name? You know what? I'm gonna redeem. I actually have a specific redeem for that. Wait, hang on. I need someone else to redeem it. Where is it? Why can't I redeem it? It doesn't make any sense. Oh, there you go. You redeemed it. My name is pronounced Rua Ua Quilta. Rua Ua Quilta. It's an Irish name, so it might seem a little bit confusing to pronounce, but trust me, the C is a Q sound. Rua Ua Quilta. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for the first time chat. I hope you can get nice and cozy and enjoy learning about medieval Ireland. Examinations of guild records demonstrate the patterns of intermarriage among goldsmiths in late medieval Dublin. Many women were involved in crafts and sales, often as part of family businesses, fulfilling less prestigious tasks or selling products such as homemade ale. These were often widows such as Dame Alice Kyteler of Kilkenny. The accusations of witchcraft made against Alice in 1324 suggest that successful businesswomen might become targets for the jealousy and suspicion of others. Training in crafts and trades were often provided within families, which perpetuated lineages of craftsmen and traders. Others might learn their skills as apprentices or assistants. Information concerning production and trade in rural areas is slim. Cloth production of wool and linen was time-consuming and often involved women's work. Smith and shoemakers were also common in rural areas, sometimes paying their rent in shoes and horseshoes. The craft elite, including skilled carpenters and metalsmiths, who worked for aristocratic patrons, sometimes find mention in Irish chronicles. Monumental masons were employed by both secular and ecclesiastical patrons. Gaelic lords appear to have exercised rights of preemption and monopoly that limited the power of traders in their territories. Nevertheless, some successful Gaelic merchant families were able to extend their operations into English towns in the late Middle Ages. The municipal records of medieval Ireland provide detailed insight into the specialised crafts and salespeople operating within areas of English lordship. Protection and sale of food and drink, cloth, leather, metalwork, and woodwork emerged as important sectors of the urban economy, with many arcane-sounding names including coppers, barrel makers, cord wainers, shoemakers, croakers or potters, and cutlers or makers of knives and other small implements appearing in urban records. Mercantile oligarchs emerged with the richest town dwellers often accompanying municipal offices, and sometimes acting as government advisors. Foreign merchants might also give rise to a position of influence, exemplified by the Italian families of Riccardi and Frescobaldi, who collected customs in Ireland for Edward I, although political machinations would cause both families to fall from power. Thank you, Haru. Thank you for the drown check. Haru, you. Oh, that's nice. That's really refreshing. I hope you're having a decent start to your week. I had a very tiring day. I took a nap after I got home. I needed eepy. I was very eepy and I needed to eep. The Rua is eepy. Servitors and professionals. You want to bury yourself in bed. You know what was nice about being, when your like mom would tuck you in and you'd be like bound to the bed with like how tight she might do it. You couldn't move. You like try and pull yourself up, make the bed made. Haru can eat. It's Monday, the start of the week. We can all do a little bit of extra sleeping. The position of government and the elite was bolstered by a range of skilled professionals. They had diverse roles and included clerks, judges, state workers, poets, musicians, and warriors. The centralised English government created posts within the Treasury, Chancery, and Judiciary of Dublin and in the shires. In areas of Gaelic lordship, officers, judges, and lawyers were often hereditary roles, fulfilled by generations of families maintained by fees for their services, and compensated by lands or a portion of the taxes and tributes levied to the territory where they worked. Larger landowners and lords employed officers to help run their estates. In areas of English lordship, the immense lands were often overseen by reeves or bailiffs, who rendered annual accounts. The reeve was placed in charge of a single manor in return for wages and allowances, while a bailiff might oversee a group of manors. The overall distinction usually lay with a steward, Latin sencallus, who would then report to his lord. In Gaelic areas, mayor or stewards collected rents and dues, while the rechter was a high-ranking official, sometimes equated with a sencallus, who might fulfill a range of duties and wield power as a noble in his own right. Lurk, you're gonna gibble and take a little nap? Well, I hope Haru, I hope my reading can help put you to sleep. If it's a particularly boring section of the book, that might be even better. And hello, D. Welcome in, welcome in. Welcome in, D. How are you? How are you? Thank you for joining, both of you. It's nice to see you guys. I hope your Monday is going well. No, wouldn't it be Tuesday for you now? Dee's in the future. She's closer to the weekend. How lucky. And good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Well, good night here for me, but it'll be it's Tuesday. Tuesday. Yeah. Do you guys whenever I write down Wednesday, I always pronounce it in my mind as Wednesday. I like Wednesday, it has to be Wednesday. Like, that's how I spell it. How did it become Wednesday? Wednesday. Wedding day. Where were we? Oh, yes. Here. But, okay, at least I hope it comes from Woden, doesn't it? I think it does, yeah. I think it does. That sounds kind of right. An essential feature of households of greater lords was entertainment. The influence that poets and musicians could wield aroused mistrust among English authorities. In 1366, the statutes of Kilkenny forbade the employment of timpaners, ferdains, scales, babblers, rhymers, and clarsaurs. Thank God there's a translation. Players of stringed instruments, men of learning, storytellers, babblers, poets, and harp players. By the English. Poets continued to have an important role in Irish society as eulogists of the elite, and their PR dimension is reflected in their continuing place in the inauguration of Gaelic leaders during the late Middle Ages. Despite prohibitions, Gaelic poets and musicians were employed in the halls of Anglo-Irish lords. A substantial volume of poetry composed under Gaelic and English patronage has survived. Performing artists were sometimes credited with powers that bordered on the supernatural. Bards and musicians also worked outside the corridors of power as popular entertainers, a vocation that was sometimes open to women as well as men, although women who pursued this career might face legal and social discrimination. Over the course of the late Middle Ages, there was an amalgam of Gaelic and English practices in the role of officers, servants, and retainers. This is reflected in linguistic borrowings, such as the title of Mareschal or Marshal, borrowed into Irish from Old French, Mareschal. It is broadly seen in the hybrid legal, financial, and military practices employed by Gaelic and English lords in Ireland during the 15th century. Ooh, okay, this section of the chapter might be interesting because it's called Fightin' Men. At the most basic level, power in the late Middle Ages was maintained by violence or the threat of violence. The decentralized structure of authority in Ireland make it imperative for lords to have access to body of fighting men. as well as being trained in arms themselves. Areas under the English crown drew on quotas of military service, owed by the direct tenants, later transmuted into a monetary payment called scutage. Adult males were also to serve in local defence, equipped according to their status. From the 13th century, taxes were levied to raise paid armies. Professional soldiers were sometimes recruited from abroad. For example, in 1337, the new justiciar, John Charlton, brought 200 Welsh archers with him, and in 1361, Lionel, Duke of Clarence, brought 360 mounted archers from Lancashire. What were mounted archers doing in Lancashire? From the late 13th century, the word cairn, from Irish cairn, troop, was used to describe Gaelic foot soldiers serving the English as mercenaries. One interesting example of a Gaelic mercenary was Philip Ua Ragalig. In 1294-5, the Crown paid him to help secure Newcastle, County Wicklow, but in 1302 the Crown paid another body of men to detain the same Ua Ragalig and other Irish felons, showing how tenuous bought allegiances could be. In Gaelic areas, there was the same obligation for adult males, excluding clergy, to serve in local defence and to supply weapons and horses if they were able. Gaelic lords also hired mercenaries. The burdening of paying and quartering these troops fell to their subjects. From the late 12th century, the use of mercenaries increased, and some were recruited from Wales and England, perhaps to compete with the arms and techniques of the Anglo-Irish. From the late 13th century, Galloglass, or Galloclaig, hired from the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, were the most prominent foreign mercenaries. In addition to military service, political alliances were sought across the North Channel. For example, in 1259, Aidh Ua Crahúr of Connacht acquired a force of 160 men as a dowry for the daughter of Dubgal mac Ruadh, king of the Hebrides. A number of Galloglass kindreds included the Mac Sivna and Mac Donal settled permanently in Ireland. By the 15th century, English and Gaelic lords alike maintained household retinues of armed men for protection and small-scale warfare. Some of these retainers were hereditary and gained positions of high status. These troops also became an outward symbol of prestige that excited comment from English commentators and visitors to Ireland. Lordship and succession. At the apex of secular hierarchy in Ireland were kings and greater nobles. This minority of group obtained their status largely by virtue of inheritance. Succession to the greater Gaelic lordships was determined by election within the ruling lineage. Gaelic lordship was conceived as a head of a people rather than a defined territory, reflected in the term Éireacht, assembly, that was often used for lordship. In English areas, much of the land was held from the king by hereditary tenants-in-chief, who succeeded by primogeniture. That's a succession of the first son. Well, firstborn, but it would be the first son. While the institutions and actions of lords are discussed in the following chapter, the principles of succession and the role of kinship are important aspects of society in late medieval Ireland and are presented here. Succession within Gaelic lordships theoretically went to the worthiest elected member of the royal lineage, or Dervina, a king group defined by 4 generations of a former lord. As Irish law admitted inheritance rights to most illegitimate children, this could lead to a large number of candidates. For example, Tordelbach in Finna of the Wine, lord of Tirchonel, who died in 1423, sired 18 sons by 10 different women and 59 grandsons in the male line. To avoid violent competition, a Taoiseach, literally second, may have been chosen within the lord's lifetime as a second-in-command who might succeed on his death. The term Adbar Rig, or Rig Dána, meaning materials of a king, defined those who were eligible to succeed and may refer to two or more contenders. Despite the risk of a wide pool of distant cousins stepping forward to claim power, it was common for a son to succeed his father in the larger Irish lordships. For example, among the Mac Cahig Mór of Munster, son succeeded father for 6 generations between 1359 and 1508. When rival claimants arose, overlords, leading vassals, or neighbouring lords might play a decisive role by backing one individual. There are many instances in the 12th century of overlords intervening in succession disputes or dividing power between contenders, perhaps to deliberately weaken their subjects or rivals. When rival neighbours backed opposing candidates, this could also weaken a lordship through prolonged warfare. The role of leading vassals or kindreds in confirming succession was sometimes formalised in late medieval ceremonies of inauguration. If a dispute between co-heirs could not be settled, a lordship could be permanently divided, but this rarely occurred without dispute. The Gaelic system of elective succession, while potentially disruptive, tended to ensure that only capable individuals from the leading kin group took power. It also avoided the problem of minorities or the cessation of a male line, which tended to compromise the power of lordships operating under the system of primogeniture. English law distinguished between legitimate and illegitimate children, allowing legitimate daughters to succeed if there were no legitimate sons. This led to something of a crisis in 1240s when a series of leading English noble lords died without adult male heirs, including the de Lacys of Meath and Ulster and the Marshals of Leinster and the Burgh of Connaught. Both in England and Ireland there was some reluctance to allow primogeniture when it would result in the property passing out of the male line. Thus, in 1299, the Rochfords of Ichthai, County Kildare, sought to disinherit daughters in order to protect their lordship. Some English lords, including the Burkes, Dillons, and Delamere, also adopted Gaelic succession practices from the late 14th century in Connaught and Westmeath. The failure of adult male succession in areas of English lordship could offer a profitable opportunity to the king, who could exercise rights of escheat, or wardship over a minor or unmarried female heir. This provided opportunities to reward favourites. For example, after the death of Hugh de Lacy in 1243, the earldom of Ulster was retained by Henry III and granted in 1254 to his son Lord Edward. The rejection of primogeniture thereby reduced the opportunities of English royal intervention within a lordship. Nevertheless, primogeniture was maintained by the majority of English lords as an expression of loyalty to the English crown. It offered some security that estates would remain intact as long as there was a legitimate son. It also removed a major incentive for violent disputes between kinsmen, although in this respect it was not always successful. Marriage. Marriage was often treated by Gaelic and English elites as a political and fiscal transaction. However, there were significant differences between marriage laws in each society that might be exploited or cause friction as the two systems came into contact. In English society, a woman was expected to bring a dowry and any property she owned to her marriage, which then passed under the control of her husband, although he could not sell or give away her property without permission. When a husband died, the widow was entitled to receive 1/3 of her husband's estate, or if there were no children, she received half. In Gaelic society, the husband usually paid a bride price, which could be returned if the marriage broke up due to the fault of the bride. The bride's family provided a marriage portion, which could be returned on divorce or if the husband died. By the 15th century, the Gaelic Irish adopted the canon law principle of the dowry, which lessened the significance of the other customary payments. A Gaelic Irish wife was nevertheless legally free to administer and alienate her own property. When marriage occurred between individuals from different legal traditions, problems could arise. Both spouses could access Gaelic law, but English law was not extended to a marriage partner of an English person until the 14th century, and only then if it was applied for. One of the grievances reported to Pope John the 22nd. Wait, what? Pope John the 22nd? Is that correct? Was there? How many Pope Johns has there been? Oh, there's a spider. He's a tiny little guy. He's fine. Pope John. My God, there's been a lot of Pope Johns. Did not realize that. As long as no like massive spider comes around, I'm okay. I'll probably kill him later. One of the grievances reported to Pope John the 22nd by the Gaelic nobility in 1317 was that Gaelic women who married English husbands were denied the right to receive 1/3 of their husband's property on his death. On the other hand, Gaelic marriage customs tended not to observe canon law. Cohabitation before marriage was not uncommon, and marriages could be entered into and terminated more freely than under English law by either partner. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, abandoned spouses increasingly used ecclesiastical courts to reach a financial settlement or oblige the return of their partner. This suggests that laws could be used selectively as a matter of principle as conflict arose. Recourse was frequently made to canon law when partners were joined within prohibited degrees of kinship. From 1215, the papacy forbade marriage within 4 degrees of kinship, that is, anyone related within 4 generations, i.e. including second cousins, by blood or affinity, i.e. the prospective partner should not have had sex with any relatives within the prohibited degrees. Prior to 1215, the rule had applied to 7 degrees of kinship, but this simply became unworkable. The elites of medieval Europe generally intermarried. In Gaelic society, where canon law was not strictly observed, marriage within the prohibited degrees was common. This was a characteristic of English society in Ireland. When Richard Power, Sheriff of Waterford, married Elena Butler, they were related according to canon by 6 different criteria. These prohibited degrees of kinship might later provide a convenient excuse to end an unwanted union. Nevertheless, dissolving a marriage through the church courts was a lengthy and expensive process. A formal divorce might only be pursued if either partner wished to pursue a legitimate marriage. In Gaelic society, the need to follow these rules may have been less urgent, as many illegitimate children maintained rights of inheritance. While some marriages might be dissolved due to consanguinity, couples who were related within prohibited degrees sometimes sought to legalize their union through papal dispensations. Often the basis for legalizing a union was that the couple had already had children together. The relative freedom of Gaelic society in relation to property and divorce might mean that they were less beholden to their spouses than were English women. However, as high-status marriage was often a matter of family agreement rather than independent volition, and expectations of gender roles were socially determined, it was questionable how much freedom Gaelic women actually had. A minority of Gaelic women gained elevated status as patrons to the church and of poets. Some women also exhibited a high degree of independence through force of personality. In 1316, Derfogale, wife of Aed Domnell, king of Tir persuaded her husband, to jointly lead a military expedition into Carbery, Drumcliff, County Sligo. Dissatisfied with the peace that her husband made with Ruadh O'Cruthur, Derfogale hired a band of Galloglass to kill Ruadh in the following year, which violated her husband's oaths. Damn, she's a bad bitch. Scary. In English society, wives may have sometimes shared in decision-making or been the dominant partner, but they might only achieve economic or legal independence in widowhood. Women in both Gaelic and English society were expected to confine sexual relations within marriage. However, outside the teachings of the church, this seems to have been less expected of men. Concubines of high-ranking men might be publicly acknowledged, especially in Gaelic society, where they were all entitled to legal protection for themselves and their offspring. These arrangements were inevitably compromised the interests of an official wife and her children. The illegitimate children of an English lord were at disadvantage in comparison to their Gaelic peers, as they lacked the entitlement to paternal support. Insecurities arising from potential repudiation, succession, and inheritance may be a controlling factor in any relationship. Generally speaking, in both Gaelic and English society, men of status wielded authority over their wives and dependents. I'll take a quick sip. Fosterage. In addition to ties of blood and marriage, fosterage generated lasting bonds between families. The outlines of medieval fosterage in Ireland are laid down in Cain Ire at the end of the 7th century. The development of this practice over time can be compared in H.C.'s tract of the 16th century. This tract outlines 5 methods of fostering. One of these, milk nurse fostering, compares with the earlier practice of fostering for affection. In this arrangement, the child would be reared by the family until adulthood, and the foster parents did not expect to give or receive payments and maintain the child themselves. Other forms of fosterages involved a fee. Usually, children of higher ranks were fostered by those of lesser status. The payments and obligations between parties depended on the duration and nature of the contract. Fosterage was regarded as important in creating vertical ties between ranks, whereas marriage was seen to be more appropriate between social equals. Child mortality in medieval society was high, and children were considered precious, both in their own right and as a resource to help cement alliances between people. The utility of children in forging social bonds did not imply that they were less loved by their birth or foster parents. This may be exemplified in a 13th century poem, Testa Ocher Glash Goidale, which laments the death of Gormflia, 5-year-old daughter of Donal Mór O'Donnell, king of Tirchonel. Conel. She was fostered by a member of the rival Unail dynasty. Gormflia was said to be the key to peace between both families, and assets of clothing, cattle, and revenues associated with her fosterage was mentioned. Aside from these references to contractual aspects of fosterage, the grief of the mother and the foster mother of the child is dwelt upon at length, and the personal qualities of the child in her behaviour and looks are praised. Foster parents were expected to raise, educate, and maintain children in a manner appropriate to the social standing of the child's father, and children's experience in fosterage would be important for future roles they would play in society. Fosterage was practiced in both Gaelic and Anglo-Irish communities. The bond of fosterage aroused concern in the royal government, which sought to outlaw cross-cultural fosterage in the 14th century. However, these laws had limited effect, and exemptions to the rule were granted. According to quote, the State of Ireland and Plan for its Reformation, written by Henry VIII in 1515, one of the reasons that royal power was so diminished in Ireland was that the, quote, English noble folk use it to deliver their children to the king's Irish enemies to foster. That was, to give you guys an example of what I had to read there, English was spelled E-N-G-L-Y-S-H-E. Deliver was spelled D-E-L-U-V or U-Y-V-E-R. Kings was spelled K-Y-N-G-E-S. What a weird language. Gossipred. Gossipred was a pledge of fraternal association between individuals guaranteed by religious ritual, often between a lord and client. I've never heard of this. Its origin lies in the Old English term godsib, meaning spiritual kin, which applied in Middle English to bonds of godparenthood and close friendship. This fictive kinship differed from marriage and fosterage, as it did not require a member of one family to cohabit with another. H.C.'s tract outlines 4 types of gospred. The first was a sponsorship of baptism performed through public ceremony at the church font, thereby winning the support of the godparent or lord. The second type of gospred was characterized by the symbolic breaking of bread by both parties to mark their pledge and a gift of salary from the lord to the client. The third form of gosspread was a more casual sworn allegiance between parties to serve a particular end. The last form of gosspread described by H.C. involved the parties receiving the sacrament of communion and pledge to uphold their affinity. The practice of gosspread, namely godparenthood, sworn brotherhood, and sworn allegiance, were common in late medieval Europe. Gerald of Wales describes the ritual of sworn brotherhood in Ireland. The two parties process around a church before entering in and swearing oaths, followed by the celebration of Mass. He also claimed that the men drank each other's blood, but this may be a garbled account of consuming Christ's blood in Mass. Another description of gosspread is provided by the Annals of Connacht for the year 1277. It recounts that Ruadh was treacherously slain by Thomas de Clare, despite the men having bound themselves by oaths on the relics of Munster and mixing their blood in one vessel. These accounts compare with the rituals of sworn brotherhood between the Dukes of Orleans and Burgundy in November 1407. Their oaths were made before an assembly and consecrated by Mass. It is possible that the origins of sworn affinity overseen by the Church lay with the continental peace movement of the 11th century. The early role of the Church in peacemaking can be seen in the career of Ceolach, Archbishop of Armagh, who oversaw temporary truces between the warring overkings of Munster and Northern O'Neill in 1107, 1109, and 1113. English writers are scathing about sworn allegiances, and as with marriage and fosterage, attempts were made to ban these vows of friendship between the English and Irish. Nevertheless, fictive kinship was important in a land whose power was decentralized and family identity was key to social standing and well-being. Similar circumstances prevailed elsewhere in medieval Europe. The ties of fictive kinship avoided conflict and aided acculturation between the Gaelic and Anglo-Irish elites. And finally we come to the conclusion. The arrival of Henry II in Ireland was a culmination of a century of changing English attitudes towards Ireland and the emergence of a colonizing mentality. The years after 1171 witnessed widespread redistribution of lands out of Gaelic control and English immigration. Society would be characterised thereafter by a division between Gaels and the English born in Ireland. This dualism was enforced through legal apartheid, which restricted Gaels' access to English common law until the 14th century. From the late 13th century, English statutes sought to prevent acculturation. Based on these rules, studies of later medieval Ireland have tended to highlight the boundaries between Gaelic and English and culture. However, segregation was not strictly enforced, and the concept of a contact zone with overlapping spheres of influence may better encapsulate relations between the different populations in Ireland. Throughout Ireland, the years from 1100 until the 1270s witnessed significant population growth. This pattern was reversed from the closing decades of the 13th century by climatic deterioration and diminished fertility of land that resulted from the overexploitation of resources. Malnourishment made communities more susceptible to plague in the 14th century, and the Black Death seems to have had a disproportionate impact on the English community in Ireland. The devastation wreaked by recurrent episodes of pestilence facilitated the territorial and political decline of the English colony, and a corresponding rise in the territorial power of Gaelic lords. As power shifted politically and demographically, the level of acculturation between the English and Irish societies increased. And that's the end of the chapter on society, which brings us to the chapter on politics, 1100 to 1500 AD, which I'm sure will be very interesting. Yes, I wonder will it touch on not Red Hugh, but the great Hugh O'Neill, because I believe he rebels just at the end of the 16th century. I'm pretty sure it's around 1598 to 1607 or something. Or no, maybe I'm not too sure. I think that was the 9 Years' War, that time period. Yay, rebellion. Well, we constantly rebelled, I'm gonna be honest. There was a rebellion every couple of generations, every couple of, decades. But the 9 Years' Rebellion was probably our most successful. Red Hugh pretty much controlled all of Ireland except for the cities, which he just didn't have the artillery required to take the cities. and it's one of those small things that, you know, if they hadn't lost at Kinsale, the Spanish Armada would have landed, or at least some of the Spanish would have landed. They probably would have brought such things. The English probably would have been forced to come to terms at that point, if the Battle of Kinsale, or not Kinsale, sorry, the oh my god, Battle of, oh no, I am thinking of the Battle of Kinsale, which was basically the battle that turned the tide in the 9 Years' War against the Irish, and led to the flight of the Earls, unfortunately. It really wasn't something that should have been lost, considering they outnumbered the English, but, you know, that's just history. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me for the reading. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought that was a little bit more palatable than talking about commerce and trade and like industry for 2 hours and for 2.5 hours or something. It was also a slightly shorter chapter, which I'm kind of glad about, because I do want to try and get a little bit of an image done for like the tweet announcement for live 2D reveal. I need to spend some time on that, so I have a little bit more time now tonight, which is good. You were listening as you were a space engineer. Have you reached space yet, son? Can you even call yourself a space engineer yet? Or are you still just an engineer? No. Oh no, son. Can't be just claiming yourself a space engineer. You're at most an aerial engineer. But I believe in you, son. I believe in you. I think you can reach the heights of space eventually. I want to see you reach those heights. Who is around? Anyone particularly doing? Right into UO last stream. You know what? No, people are sleeping, so I don't want to raid into something that's not ASMR, because that might not be appreciated. Is there anyone doing ASMR? Well, there's always people doing ASMR, but is there anyone that I'd be happy to raid into? Someone's playing Genshin. That is quite the image. Guys, don't scroll through ASMR. Yeah, the ASMR category is very scary. I'm amazed at the type of things that they allow on that. Now, because people have to like put a filter on their, or they put like this stream has adult stuff, and it kind of like covers the thumbnail of the stream. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit easier, but at the same time it's hard to see like who's a VTuber and if they're doing anything nice. Because sometimes people just have that on there because they're like, oh, it's an 18+ stream, I don't want children. Which is fair, but dangerous category, do not approach the 18+. Yeah, no, that's a scary place. That's a very scary place. Just want to see what people are doing. Oh, okay. Okay, I think we might raid into Pixie Hound. She's doing a pupathon. Sleepy puppy comforts you. She's a little puppy. So, we'll just don't then. It's a scary place. I think this seems alright. We'll start raiding. We'll raid into Pixie Hound. That's a cute little name. Cute name. Pixie Hound. But thank you guys so much for joining me as always today. It's very much appreciated. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about Ireland. I learned little bits and pieces as always. Thank you guys. Oh, thank you guys. Um, I hope to be able to read again soon. I might do. I definitely want to get into that political part of the book because I think that's going to be spicy with all the different names and especially with the invasion of the English. That's going to be quite the thing. But I will see you guys later. Go raibh míle maith and slán go fóill.